All right. Well, welcome to Family Dinner Podcast, everybody out there on the World Wide Web. We're the Harris family here to entertain you and talk about interesting topics. Today, we're going to talk about prosperity. Um, and to get us started, I want to just, I guess, talk about prosperity. To me, I think the most interesting aspect, and I guess even just the most, uh, maybe, I guess that has the most layers to it is prosperity, is financial prosperity. And so that's what I want to talk about the most. But I think it's good to start off just talking about prosperity in general. Um, so Liz, what do you think prosperity is?
Oh, okay. Diving right in here. Yeah, when I was looking at the notes, to me, I feel like the financial aspect of it and the energetic aspect of it is so connected because I feel like for me, when I experience more joy and like just an energetic abundance of feeling like connected to the world and engaged with the world, I feel like financially that like comes back to me. So for me, prosperity is kind of intertwined in all of those different layers and all of those different things. It's hard for me to think of it just as a financial thing. But I don't know that I've thought of like even the word prosperity very much. I like when you guys were sending some thoughts, I was like, I've thought of like abundance, but I really like the word prosperity. Um, I feel like that's kind of like an embodiment of a certain energy versus like I'm abundant or I have a lot of money. Like prosperity just feels like this energy to me, or this like embodiment of an abundance on like all different levels. Like having the energy to like show up in the world in a certain way. And like, I think I also think it's kind of like a luxury that I think a lot of people don't have, especially these days. So,
Don't have in general, or don't have to think about?
yeah, I mean, I just think there are like there's just so many people that don't have the energy or the time or the space to even think of that. Like they would say like this conversation is maybe even like a luxury to have, right? Like that we can like dive into this and think about it and hope for it. I mean, I hope like I in an ideal world we would all be prosperous. Um and so when I was thinking about it, I was like and just thinking of even like the way like growing up and like maybe not feeling financially prosperous sometimes and like how did that relate to like how I felt or how I internalized that in other ways too, not just like I think internalizing it in a financial perspective, but then like how does that it affected me in a lot of other ways, right? It's like not just this box of like, oh, I wasn't prosperous financially, so that's it. It's like also like self-confidence and like feeling all sorts of other energies tied to that too.
Josh, what do you, how does prosperity connect to financial success for you? Like, what's the percentage of that relationship?
I'm trying to ask like a statistical question. What is this? Um, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. Well, I can.
I guess what I mean is like when you, and this is kind of, I guess what I want to talk about in general is our perceptions of, and there's so many different ways of thinking about prosperity, right? And I do kind of want to get into the different ways, but I think the different adjectives of that is like success or abundance, like Liz said, what, and in general, I want to talk about, our different perspectives of this compared to how we grew up, right? And kind of
Yeah.
our own evolutions within this. So, the question that I'm trying to ask Josh to clarify a little more is, and I guess to throw my own experience into it a little bit, is like I feel like it's been in this evolution of for I don't know, the first at least 30 years of my life, I equated like success and prosperity mostly with money, and then in my 30s, I started to think much more about like mental health and I mean, even, late 30s, just the last few years, I've thought about, thought connected that much more to that. And, and yeah, so I guess for you in your life, you know, tell me about that percentage, I guess. Like, do you equate prosperity with financial success or with something else?
Um, I mean, I think there's definitely a part of it that is financial. I think there's a section of my life where, I really wanted to make a certain amount of money. And I wanted, maybe I tried to convince myself that like the reason why I wanted that money was for good reasons, because I kind of and and I don't know if I believe this anymore as much, but I just don't worry about money as like I used to. Um, but I used to think it was bad to want to be rich. Like I thought it was bad to want to be wealthy. Like, I wanted, I had my goal was $5 million in this time frame, and then, you know, I remember talking to some very wealthy people, and I was like, hey, like, why? Like, I just have this feeling that it's bad to be wealthy, and they're like, why? Like, like, where does that come from? That makes zero sense. Like, you can do so many good things with money. And I'm like that clicked. Um, but as I've gotten older, I understand like, yeah, that money would be cool, and is other things that you could do with it. But like that's not what prosperity is to me, right? Prosperity isn't the money. Like for example, like I feel like the most prosperous I've ever felt in my life, and I make as much money as I did when I was in my 20s, and so like it's not what it meant to be. Are there thoughts of like it'd be nice to make that much money? Yes, but then I can quickly think, man, if to make that much money, like there's so many things I'd have to be doing that I'm not willing to do. And and I think you will hear voices on the internet all over say like, well, it doesn't have to be hard. Like you could do this. And you're like, sure. Like there are like you can get lucky and you can find that stroke, but I think real prosperity is what it's coming down for me is even with those people, like they're taking risks, they're doing work. The prosperity is in the work. The prosperity is in the action. And until you can enjoy that, you're not going to feel prosperous.
So where do you land at now as far as like your perspective on wealth? If you um thought that that was evil or bad at one point, and then you know evolved to think that it wasn't, then where are you now?
I think it's a personal preference. I think like I don't think it's bad or good, right? I think, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but wealth and money has no inherent value. We assign it value. And so to me, like being wealthy is there, it does not have, I don't know, it just doesn't have value in that sense of like it's good or bad. I think it's probably a very nuanced, like, it's just like it depends on what you need and what you want and where you are in your life. And, like I understand like money makes, there's people that would hear that and be like, that's crazy. Like, that's absolutely crazy. You don't want more money. It's like, no, no, no. Like, I want more money, but I'm not willing to sacrifice some of the things I'm doing to get that. Right. Like, it's that thing of like, there's trades that you have to make. Right. Ben, I think that's what you say, right? Like, there's no sacrifices. It's all trades. And so my opinion on money that it is neither bad nor good. It just is. Um, and choose your relationship with it.
Ben, you want to expand on that? What Josh was he referenced to you?
Amen. This is cool though. I love this conversation. So real quick, what Josh was saying is like, you mean when he said like what I say about trade-offs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first off, that gives me an ego boost. So thanks, Josh, for shouting me out on that. I probably got it from someone. Um, but yeah, it's like to me, it's like when people talk about, yeah, it's like it takes sacrifice to like that. I'm like, ugh, like that just has always like icked me out because it's like literally, it's like,
What's your fire number?
what's my fire number?
Oh, you don't even know that, Ben?
No, what? I think everyone's shaking their head.
That's like I feel like that's like a bro term, like
Uh-uh.
financial independence, retire early.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, now I know. Thank you, thank you.
Like if
Yeah.
you like if you get to 2 million in savings or whatever, then you can quit your day job.
Okay, yes. I love that, right? So it's the same thing, right? It's like actually I haven't posted this yet, but I wrote something about like just even the idea of retirement, right? It's like it's the end, right? Of like when I get this, I'll be able to relax. When I get this, I'll be able to blank, right? Of like some future goal that we think like it's a fantasy. And I'm still telling myself those stories. I'll be 100% honest. Right? It's like when but like a lot of the work that I've been doing personally is embracing like not getting that because and it's like I think we're all dancing in this like the nuance and the complexity. To me, how I would describe it is like alignment. And I think Josh was alluding to that too, of just like what do you actually want? And even through you listening to you guys, like what came through my mind was like I want more money. And I would actually love to talk about like our own resistance to that. I think that could be a cool topic in this.
Yeah, I'm
I
I'm
think
deciding what we're talking about here today, Ben K.
just a note, just a producer's note. You can take it or leave it. Um, but
No,
yeah,
someone
it's
remember
like,
that. Let's all remember that.
yeah, but it's like, so for me, it's, yeah, it's like owning, yes, I want more money. And then also addressing, well, what part of me feels resistant to even owning that? And like, I'm very similar in the sense of like one of my posts that I've written is like, I'm not a millionaire, but I have more freedom than a lot of them do. So it's like, so include like, I don't want fast, chaotic. I don't want hustle. I don't want kind of like Josh to sacrifice. Like to me, like authenticity and alignment. Um, and I feel like this is at least what I tell myself, like part of my life's mission is to figure out how to do that while also being financially prosperous. Like, can I stay true to me, like fully? Um, one of this affirmations I told myself for a long time is like, I get paid to be myself. And so it's like, um, but even that is so layered. Like, there's so much like within that that I've realized like I'm holding back in certain ways or limiting myself. So just like to me, I think it really comes down to like alignment of that, like being really honest and true to me of what do I want and also like what God wants for me too, and like bridging that instead of like either one pushing away financial success because of certain judgments or shame or guilt that I have about it. And that also includes like responsibility inside of that. Um, and the fear of being judged and criticized by others is also wrapped inside of that. So it's not just like money, it's other things that are inside of that for me. But it's like, can I rise and connect and mold all of those things together? To me, I feel like that's what prosperity feels like. It feels like freedom too. And a side note, this is to end on, I'm not sure if this is a bank everywhere, but in Austin, Liz, have you seen there's a bank called Prosperity Bank? And I'm like, that's what I'd call my bank. Just because it's like, it's not like some corporate thing. It's like, I'd want a bank there, even though I don't. But,
Bank of
it's like,
abundance.
say what?
Bank of abundance.
Yeah, like that. Like I'm all about
If you're hearing this, Prosperity Bank, we're open to sponsorships.
it.
Send us free stuff. We want stress balls. No,
Let's
like talk about like what Ben was saying, and I think we relate that to prosperity is I think we relate prosperity to like relief of difficulty. And I don't necessarily think that's true, right? Like I think part of the challenge of life, at least for me, is like, no, like there's joy in hard things. And it's okay to do hard things. And if I can change this perspective of like, oh, I want some relief, like it's this, I mean, it's cyclical thing. Well, then you find relief in the hard thing so it gets easier. Like, sure, like it is meta, right? But I think, I mean, we might get there, Joe, I don't know, but right. So like my term of prosper is religious in large part because of our of the faith that we were raised in, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have a book of scripture called the Book of Mormon that over 50 or more times it says, if ye keep my commandments, you will prosper.
in the
And
land.
so I think people, you can hear that, and like as you hear it, like, oh, like God will take care of me, God will take care of me, which I think is true. But I also think like, no, you saw even as they tell stories in scripture, they kept the commandments, but it wasn't easy, right? Like that's like the point isn't relief. The point anyway, for me, that's what my takeaway.
Yeah, that's a really nice. I think that's actually a really good way to wrap up this part is the world, I think, generally considers prosperity to be the alleviation of stress and obstacles, right? If you are prosperous, then life is easy, which I think we all agree is pretty much not the case, right? Like a certain and there's been lots of studies on this too, right? Like there's this number that's always shifting as far as like uh like the happiness quotient that it's easier to be happy if you're making, I think 10 years ago it was like at 70,000. The interesting thing is I saw like a big adjustment on this. Like now it's like 175,000 or something like that. Like because I remember first hearing that number being like, oh, 70,000, like, yeah,
Get our
it's
fact
almost,
checkers on that. Get our fact checkers on that.
but it's interesting those different numbers, right? Because at 70,000, my thought was like, oh, that's like meaning I took that to mean like, oh, anything I make more than that isn't making my life better, right? Like it's in some ways making it harder. And I think to me that's easier to wrap my head around than like, oh, 175,000 or whatever the number is at right now. Like um obviously things that just cost more and things, yeah, just inflation has gotten a lot higher. But it's kind of the same thing of like, oh, if you can cover your basic necessities, then anything above that becomes superfluous. And in a lot of ways causes more stress. I mean, I remember having a conversation with like a financial planner about like how much money you need to save for retirement or whatever like that. And he told me that I was like saving the same amount as one of his clients that was making $800,000 a year. And he said that he had recently met with this person and that they said, yeah, I don't know where all that money goes. And of course they could look at it and say, here, this is where all it goes. But that's so true for most people that no matter how much money you make, you're always spending like a certain percentage of it, like without really thinking too much about it. Anyways, let's move on from that a little bit. I want to actually talk about what Ben brought up, which I think is a good way to talk about prosperity and how it relates to how we grew up. And I think this is how you said it, Ben, like our resistance to prosperity or a resistance to like financial success. And I'll prime it a little bit with I think it would be interesting to hear people's perspectives on this, but I think that I maybe got the luckiest in our like in the birth order lottery as far as like how we grew up. I remember talking to Heather about this at some point that like um like I mean for all of my high school years, we lived on Valley View and like lived in a house that we owned, and like mom worked at Computer Associates for all those years. Like I mean, I bought my first car, but then mom got a new car a year later, and she gave me her old car for free. That was like this sweet car, and and Heather was like still driving, her uh junker around or whatever, her Toyota or whatever it was. Um, and I think like I just got lucky in some of those ways where some of you had a little more financial stress, and I was still like observed some of those things, and of course like I think affected me, but I think as far as that resistance that Ben talked about, I how that relates to me is I feel like I don't have any resistance to prosperity. I feel like I don't know, I just have been lucky that I am able to like go with the flow, and it's not like I chose a profession that's like super financially safe, and I'm realizing that a lot right now. But even then, like I'm in a pretty secure place, even though I don't have as much money coming in as I want to, like I own two houses and have some money in savings, and things are stressful, but I still feel secure and I still feel um prosperous, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I want to, can I speak to what you just said, Jared, about I actually did buy Josh a truck and I did give Heather a Toyota too. I don't remember passing on my car to you. I know the Honda. Are you thinking about the Honda?
yeah.
Josh actually rolled that and wrecked it, but maybe that was just what you guys were sharing.
No,
Well,
Joe, he had it primarily before I did. Then he
Okay.
went on a mission.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting to note too. I think I guess I'm feeling resistant to this word of prosperity being linked to money because that is not at all how I feel about the word prosperity. Um,
yeah, and I guess like I went back and forth on like what we're talking about. I guess to me, as far as like our childhood and how we grew up, you know, it's as far as like the story I'm trying to tell and then the
mhm.
narrative I'm trying to lay down here is like what was our relationship with money growing up, and just because I that's how I thought about prosperity as being, yeah, just growing up, and then how that evolved into something else,
Of
but
feeling
I think
abundant.
you're,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that prosperity is defined by money.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but mom, why don't you jump in? I mean, like, yeah, as far as, um, I mean, I guess weigh in on that I mean, were you aware of that at all? Like when we were kids, that some of us had different financial opportunities?
Definitely. I mean, I would say you and Ben were definitely the savers. you always had money. And if I needed to borrow money, I knew I could say, hey, do you have $20 or whatever? You guys had the money, you just naturally. And I've noticed that in my own family with my own siblings. Like Aunt Paula was always a saver. Even today, her husband will say, I don't know what you do with the money you make. It's hidden away somewhere. She's just always been a saver.
In her
But
bra.
yeah, I do think that is, and I've looked at that going, what does that mean? Like how is it just a natural thing that people come into this life with that savings mentality where other of us just want to spend and buy? I mean, honestly, my mentality, even growing up, if I had a certain amount of money, I was thinking about what I could do with it, how I could spend it. So I think different in, that way.
And do you think, I guess, so what does that feel nature or nurture for you? That feels more just nature, sounds like you're saying.
Um, I'm not sure specifically what you're asking. You mean if saving money is more nurturing or
No,
No,
no, like if if your tendency to want to spend the money that you have has to do with more just your biology, your DNA, right? Or with
or
like
how we,
some experiences that you had growing up.
yeah, well, that's what I said. I think it's part of just the person, the personality, because like I had a sister who really liked to save, but her next closest sister didn't, right? They're only a year apart. Then I'm, 8 years younger than my sibling. So I think my parents, I mean, yeah, they argued. I've written my money story and sent the link to you guys about that. I think some of you have read it. It's on my blog on my website, but I go into how my parents argued a lot about money. I mean, my dad, when he retired, I mean, this was, I don't know how many years ago. I mean, he would be over 100 if he were still alive, but when he retired, he was making like 65, 70,000 a year. Their house payment was $250.
Wow.
Back then they didn't, and he worked on the railroad, for years, retired with a really good railroad pension that also gives the spouse a pension. They weren't good savers. They didn't have a lot of money, but their house was paid off. Grandpa was always super generous. I grew up seeing him give people $20. He'd open his wallet. There were things I remember my cousin was going to go on a mission and his dad said, well, I'm not going to pay for that. And so grandpa said, I'll pay for it. And at the time, grandpa wasn't even active in the church. So I think he just was very generous and I loved that. And I saw what that did with people. And to me, that felt prosperous. He had a generous nature. He wanted to help others. He was a very hard worker, but he didn't really save a lot. I mean, we had a boat and a camper, and then we always went on vacations. He believed, which I also feel is prosperous, he believed in having fun equally as much as working hard. Yes, we did get our jobs done and work hard, but he also loved to play hard. So
And
I,
do you
I
think,
was,
and was
if
grandma more of a saver?
she was more, so she came from a background, right? She was more, I would say, fearful of not having enough than grandpa was. But I don't think she was a saver either, because when you're afraid of not having enough, you can be a saver. But she was, I mean, I remember them fighting about how she spent his whole paycheck. And he's like, where did this go? Like we're broke before payday and I make, good money. And back then we didn't have cars. I mean, everything was less. So you're talking about this average of 65, 70, which he was considered middle class, blue collar. And I remember the guy who did our taxes lived down the street. He was a principal of a school. And he told me one time when your dad and I went to get our taxes done, how bugged he was that my dad made more than him when he didn't even have a college degree. And so that even planted something in my head like, well, that's interesting that you can go to college and not even do as well, financially. But I think also going back to your question about grandma, because she was raised like her mother walked out on them. She lived with her grandma and grandpa, slept on the couch. I mean, never had her own bedroom from like 6, 7 years old. So definitely, I mean, didn't have security. So then she marries grandpa, who is a hard worker. She had to work for a while too. She worked part-time at a grocery store as a cashier. And back then, they didn't really have credit cards, but they could put things on credit. I remember them telling me they'd put food on credit at the store, and then grandpa would pay it off, when they got money. So a lot of things you could buy on credit, but then it wasn't really a credit card. And as long as you paid it regularly, the stores would do that. And I remember them, getting like RC Willie's stuff on credit and paying it off. And
That's actually so wild to me that like credit cards are that new. Like, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that, but I'm like, what in the world? Like, that's just wild. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but yeah, wow, interesting.
No, let's talk about the monopoly of Visa and MasterCard.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So I guess painting that picture, I grew up in a home that I think had both, right? There was this mentality, which I would say was prosperous in all those factors. And my parents fought about money all the time. More because my mom was spending it. She was the one buying the groceries, buying the clothes, doing the things, paying the bills. So I got from that, I don't ever want to have to ask somebody for money or report to someone for money. So I started working very young. I mean, I got my first job. I figured out I could work, back then. You still were they wanted you to be 16, but I started working at Burger Bar, which is, you guys all know that place. And I was, I think, 14 and a half when I started working there. And grandpa was so bugged because he liked these vacations. And in the summer, they told me if you leave for a vacation, you won't have a job when you came back. And he was like, I don't give a damn if you have a job when you come back. You're going with the family. And so, but I wanted to have my own money from a very young age. So I worked. I didn't love babysitting. So I figured out different things and
So what do
wanted
you
to have
think
my
is
own money.
your so going back to like that resistance, like do you have a resistance at all to prosperity, or financial success? Or have you ever?
I think that I definitely have a guilt about and I can tell you like certain jobs that I've had where I've made over 6 figures, or like that book that I wrote that, sold over 100,000 copies. I felt really good about that book that I wrote because I could see what I did. So I kind of felt like what I did earned that.
Tangible.
It was tangible. But some of these jobs, I remember being like, I jumped from, like, I was selling Valpak, and the year I got the job at Computer Associates, and I went from like 40,000 to over 100,000. And I felt really guilty about that, even though I had the skills to do that job. And then in the 2 years I worked there, I didn't really like it. It wasn't challenging. I had conflict with, I was making good money, but so learning those things about myself, right? I like to do things that I feel I'm growing, I'm producing, I feel like I can see that I'm making a difference, right? So even just making that money at Computer Associates, I mean, they laid off 900 people after 9/11, so I was eventually laid off. But I don't like sitting around and getting a paycheck in an office. I like feeling like, whoa, I am, learning and growing, and this feels prosperous.
Well,
Not in a money way. Yeah.
yeah, ideally maybe it would be that feeling from the book, right? Of like something tangible, like this is directly from me.
And it felt thrilling that I did that, that I created that versus kind of having a job and this is actually why I don't like being employed. Someone else kind of always has that say over you, right? And it is very risky to be self-employed. But to me, as much as I hate it when it doesn't work out, I love it when it does because it feels more empowering. And I like having, that
Do we
power.
all have that? Do we all like hate bosses and people telling us what to do?
Yes.
No.
And
But I
Josh?
find that interesting, Mom, of just connecting that like prosperity, even to me, it sounds like with creativity of like your creation is like directly impacted by your feeling of prosperity, right? It's not necessarily, I mean, sure, like that was financially prosperous for you, that book, but it's like if it had just made you enough to like pay for everything and also that feeling, I think you would have just felt just as prosperous.
And yeah, let me interject on that, Liz, because I just learned something by what you were saying about myself is in 2017, when I took my life story writing business online and I'd invested $10,000 in someone teaching me kind of how to do that. And I made that money back like immediately by doing what I learned. And I was signing people up like this, making thousands of dollars from each person, right? And what I experienced is when they didn't do the thing, right? They would buy the program and I would coach them, but then they weren't really doing it. I started to feel like, what? I felt deflated. It wasn't as enjoyable. And so even though the money was coming in, I had this inner conflict, like I can't keep enrolling people if they're not doing it. Like
Hmm.
was this feeling of, I don't want them paying me this much money if they're not doing it. And Ben and I have talked about this, like this conflict. So I think for me, the lesson in that I'm still learning, even just having my sister here was another reflection of this, me wanting to help her, right? So what is that about me tying in my worth to what they do and then not doing that and realizing I can share what I've done with them, right? Share this offering, but if they don't take it and use it, I shouldn't feel guilty. But it changed my experience. And so when I started feeling that, what do you think happened with my enrollments? When I started feeling almost guilty that they weren't doing it, I wasn't enrolling people, right?
Yeah.
So I thank you for pointing that out, Liz, because that's also what I've learned from that. And I think that's what's so scary for me, again, to go into coaching is I know how deep that goes within me. If I don't see the results, then because when I do, it is the best high ever. It is the best high to see people have these ahas and go, whoa, what you just shared with me or taught me is changed my whole perspective about my story. That is worth more than any money could ever bring. So that to me is prosperity. But I think the thing is, we live in a world we have to have money, right? I saw this quote the other day that I love that says, and this was more talking about God, like referencing, everything has been provided for us that we need, and it's already been paid for in the thought of, Jesus Christ in that respect. But what I thought about is, yeah, how interesting on this topic of money and prosperity. We have everything we need. I mean, we could live off the land, right? But we live in a world that there's just all these messages about the things we need. Anyway, we could go off on that. But that's why I think the older I get, I don't see that money in my own life does not bring security or even happiness. Just doesn't.
Can I hop in here?
You haven't said anything. You don't get to say something now.
I feel like I've just been absorbing and learning and listening from so many different places, but I definitely am like super activated. Um, but I'm glad that mom like touched on this at the end because I feel like for me, I was, I guess, feeling how much the first thing I thought of when I thought of prosperity was freedom. And however, as this like conversation has gone on, and even with the topic that Ben brought up around what is our resistance to, receiving more. And I think that doesn't necessarily all have to be money, right? It can be all sorts of things. It brought up the word worthiness. And I think that for me, I have correlated that to like in the past, like how much I earn or how much I do, how much I give, whether that's like service or time as a mother, or as, a volunteer at the school or, in different places, that was how I earned my belonging or my worthiness. And I think something that I feel like I'm finally getting at 44 years old, yay, is that it's nothing that I do or don't do that I get to receive. Number one, like who I am, that like authenticity piece, I think is huge. If we actually can like just be ourselves, like share our light that we all came here to share, like that probably is one of the most prosperous things we can access. And then I think when mom was also sharing, it was reminding me of when I interviewed Grandma and Grandpa Brown and Grandma and Grandpa Harris, their life stories. And when I asked them, like, if there was anything they could share, and I mean, there was a couple messages, but applicable to this conversation, one was that like they would have saved more
Hmm.
money. Both of them, actually. Um, Grandma Harris and Grandpa Brown both shared that in, I don't remember Grandpa Harris actually talking about that because I interviewed them like separately, all four of them. But I find that like really interesting that even their value was still kind of like tied to how much they had saved. And and so like as I'm tuning into this, I'm like, that's for me, that's like part of a generational, whether you want to call it a trauma or a trait or whatever it is, of just like, even though Ben and Jared didn't get that, right? Like which I almost want to say does correlate to their worthiness in some way. Like, like I feel like Ben and Jared are more, just from my perspective, like comfortable with being themselves. Like from an early age, I feel like I saw that reflection. And not that the rest of us weren't, but it's like there's this like code or frequency of like, maybe it's knowing like your worth isn't tied to like anything other than being yourself. And anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there, but yeah, so I guess for me, I'm just feeling this conversation is changing a lot within me, just listening to all of you. So thank you all for just sharing. And yeah, I think when we really can connect also to the element that everything really is provided for us, whether it's through God or Mother Nature. Like that was something else that was coming up in my mind because Summer's also been watching a lot of these YouTube videos about living on the land and just like camping and making fire. Like she loves that. And I'm like, is this what we're going to be doing at some point? Because she's really preparing for it. Um, yeah, because I do feel like nature does provide, like everything is there. Like looking in my garden, even just, a few plants, like at the end of the season, there's so many seeds and there's so much fruit that could grow so much more food for so many other people or animals. Like nature is overflowing with abundance, but it's not about necessarily like proving itself. It's not proving itself, it just is. And it's like sharing it with whoever wants to take it. And anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, Heather, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about just your relationship growing up to prosperity and money, and I guess just like the journey? I mean, do you feel like that's changed from when you grew up? Actually, one specific question that you could talk about is, as far as what mom said, and maybe this is even like something we can all touch on as far as like our first job
Mhm.
and maybe our like mental state at that point. Like, you had a lot of jobs as a teenager.
Mhm.
What, I guess, why did you, and what was your relationship with money and at that point?
Um, I think at that point it was, I mean, it's interesting. I haven't actually like gone super deep into like contemplating, I guess, like all of the reasons why I got a job. I mean, I think I've said like I didn't want to like ask mom for money. And I didn't think, I mean, she didn't, a lot of the time when I started getting a job, she didn't necessarily have money to give me. Like I've never really felt like I could ask dad or mom for money. And that's been an interesting reflection with like Steve, because like he has, that's something he's just always felt like he could do. And all of his siblings at different times have been, helped, whether it's to buy a house or different things. Um, so for a long time, I felt similar to that, like even paying for my kids' school, or, I was like, I don't feel like I need to do that. Like, I don't want to, but I do feel a shift in me occurring. Like, I actually would really like to help them and to give them more opportunities to not necessarily have to struggle the same way. Sure, they'll probably still have to learn certain things no matter what, but there is a stress that comes when you don't have enough money. So, so yeah, I feel like I've also, I guess, like grown from not necessarily wanting to like help my kids with that, like feeling like there is something you learn from like doing it yourself, to now like being like, oh, I think like I would like that opportunity to help them if I felt inspired to, rather than just not having the means or the access to money. And not that like money is the only resource to share, because I feel like there's a lot of resources to share that aren't, financial. Um, so yeah, I guess that's part of my experience, and maybe I need to ponder on that a little more. But yeah.
I think I was thinking about this, and for my first jobs, it was like a sense of duty. Like,
Mm.
it was just the thing that I was supposed to do. And I mean, like, mom, like, that's funny because I don't even know if I was like thinking about getting a job, because I was 15 when I started working at Partners, the restaurant.
Mm.
And mom had like done some sales with them or something with Valpak. And like, I don't know if they mentioned that they were hiring or whatever, or just like, I mean, it was close and I could walk there. Um, but I mean, yeah, mom got me an interview there, and it's funny because I don't remember. It's not like I was thinking about I mean, I guess I had little jobs, but yeah, it was like I guess it was like a sense of duty of like, and then it does, I mean, it totally like gives you a sense of independence. I actually think about that job a lot just because like it was my first exposure to the world, right? Like working with, these servers, these waiters and waitresses like in their 20s, like talking about their lives, right? Like I hadn't been exposed to that before, and it was like an introduction to the world. Um, Anybody else? First job feelings?
I was like what Heather, I feel like this has kind of been brought up a couple of times, but like the idea of hard work, of like that, and kind of like connecting, because prosperity, like we've talked about, in a like financial way, but like there are so many different layers to it. But I'm just interested in that idea because I think I have that of like tying hard work to worthiness and like that, like you almost like if you work hard, you are worthy and will be prosperous. Like there's this like correlation with that. And then just kind of learning that that's not the case. And even what Heather mentioned of just like how our authenticity really is like so much of that and just like that we are provided for. And I think like comparing that view of like what we get from the world, maybe like messages from the world, and even like our experiences, yeah, with our jobs, our work, like getting positive feedback. Like on my first job, I remember when I left, they like wrote me a letter and like thanking me for how hard of a worker I was. And
Where
like
was your first job?
it was in when I was staying with dad for a summer and I worked at like an Italian ice place. And I
What
mean
was your
that
favorite
obviously
flavor?
all of them. I just spoon them. But yeah, I feel like and that feels good, right? Like that feels good to get like especially for my ego or like my yeah, if I'm not feeling confident and then someone like hand writes a letter to you like saying here's something good about you, like you are a hard worker, like you show up and like it, but like how can we take that in but not make that mean like maybe more? Or I'm just curious kind of maybe what other people think about that because
Yeah,
it's like an
thanks for bringing that
interesting
up,
topic.
Liz, because I did want to eventually get to this, and this is actually the original idea for this topic that me and Heather talked about in a different episode of like progress and hard work being this like focus in society. And I, I think my main resistance to that idea is actually just the idea that like my worth is not tied to me, but is tied to like something that I'm doing, right? That like that I have to, yeah, that I have to work hard and I have to follow these certain rules to achieve something. And that's what's gonna like make that's what's gonna prove my worth to the world. And I think that's it, and this is such a complicated idea for me because you know, I do think some things are inextricably, connected to work. I think, even talking about that everything is right here for the taking, even talking about like living off of the land, like, unless you're living in, a tropical place where there's just, bountiful, like things fall food falling off of trees and things like that. In most places in the world, you do have to toil for your food, or someone is toiling for your food. And of course there's joy in that too. I think that's probably the big difference is it's different working on a farm, uh providing for other people. And that's, no, actually one thing that uh that's interesting about living here is, like right now we do this like food program in the winter where we sign up and we go to this farm. We do these weekly pickups, and I went there to pick up our food yesterday. And there's this, big ice and wind storm happening yesterday and today. And so I was just talking to the lady a little bit about that, and she's like, yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna feed everybody. And she's talking about like the town, right? Like she's not talking about like herself or her family. Like she's talking about how am I gonna transport food to other people. And it
And
is
you're in Connecticut. So tell us, how are they growing food in a greenhouse or what are they doing?
that's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure as far as the logistics. I mean, it is kind of, it's not, I mean, we're not buying vegetables. The things that like
Uh,
that come weekly, I guess, are things that are like more readily available in the winter, like meat, bread, eggs, milk, you know? And so, yeah, it's things that are being produced locally that can be produced locally in the winter. But it's yeah, it's like I love that topic because it is so complicated because I want to not believe that prosperity is connected to hard work because it seems rigged or something like it seems like unfair. But I guess also talking about Liz, I think you alluded to this a little bit. I feel generally happier when I'm more productive. And so it's this constant thing of, yeah, like, I mean, I guess it really comes to me, it feels like it comes down to like worth and the worth that you feel, you know, are you trying to prove that somehow to yourself? And really that truth is that we don't have to, right? And maybe that's what some of you meant, you know, talking about God and that everything is already ours, that that worth is right in front of us for us to just grab, right?
Now, I think it's that we are meant to give to each other and that we don't feel good when we're not doing that, right? And to me, that, like I said, I was making money, but I didn't feel happy if I wasn't being productive and actually feeling like I was doing and helping, right? And I personally think we're designed to do that, to help each other, not to be in this world alone, just taking care of ourselves, thinking selfishly, but to also be helping the community at large, our families, our, you know, everything to prosper and grow. To me, prospering is growth. And so I love that idea, and I've seen it reflected in my own life. I am not happy sitting around doing nothing, having all this time. You know, I like time. I like a good amount of it, right? To be more balanced. But I also love seeing the fruits of my labors because I feel like it's helping, benefiting someone else besides just myself. And I think we are wired for that, actually. We want to feel like we are helping, we are adding to the good at large.
That's
To me,
that's true. Sorry, Jared, to cut you off.
yeah.
I do generally believe in that, the good. However, I would challenge that thought by saying you're still tied to the outcome of helping someone else, right? And as you think about living a principle-centered life, like it's still outwardly dependent on did they get help? I am valuable. So, right, that's where I think you do want to be helpful and serve. Those are valuable principles, but the values that you're living on are service, right? And then that is what feels good. And I just to draw the line of like how someone else feels is different than me living my value of service and feeling fulfilled.
Well, Mom, you mentioned that, right? Like you mentioned feeling that sense of like not feeling fulfilled if someone else was not getting what you thought they could out of it. But
Yeah, like me thinking, are you receiving my gift? And
What if they
yes,
don't though? What if they don't receive it?
yes,
yes,
yes. So I do think that is part of the natural man, the human being, that we are, that is just how it is. And I don't know if anybody can not do that, honestly. If you're in a physical body and you have your ego, which you are going to have, that's just how it is.
I do feel like there is maybe more of an energy of kind of surrendering to that, of like showing up or just acknowledging and even having this conversation, right? Of understanding that like we can only control like what we do, right? Like we
Yes.
cannot force someone to receive our service. Even we can't even, I mean, receiving is like a whole other topic of like being able to receive. So it's like you know, I think just showing up with that energy of service, like, and then surrendering to it, because we cannot control other people. We can't, we can't have them feel, I mean, some people might even be offended by the idea that we want to serve them, you know? It's like there's so many other emotions tied to it.